Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Welcome to lesson 2. We're going to be picking up where we left off by discussing plurals. So, plurals are a feature of many different languages, but in Arabic, we'll see that plurals have some very unique characteristics. So, let's start with a simple example. And the word Muslimun means a Muslim. Okay, how do we know that it's a Muslim and not the Muslim? Well, like we covered in the last lesson, we see the un ending, the tanween ending here, the double dhamma, which means a Muslim. If it was al-Muslimu, it would mean the Muslim. To change that from a Muslim to a bunch of Muslims, some Muslims, we say Muslimuna. So we see the ending has changed by the addition of the una. So Muslimun becomes Muslimuna. Now this kind of plural is just one of the 3 different kinds of plurals that we'll see in just a moment. But you should know that this applies to nouns. So nouns can be singular or plural. But it also applies to adjectives. So adjectives can also be singular or plural. Now that's something we don't see in English, for example. Now, there are 3 ways to pluralize in Arabic. So a given noun or a given adjective will have one of these 3 ways. Okay? So let's start with the first one. Masculine sound plural. So what does that mean? So you should think of, when I say sound plural, that's kind of like a regular plural. So just the same way in English, house becomes houses, the kind of the standard plural is to add an S. Similarly, in Arabic, in the masculine sound plural, the standard way is to add the una ending. So the word ظالم means an oppressor. ظالمون means the oppressors, some oppressors. Okay, so a group of oppressors. The same way, tawwabun, the forgiving. Tawwabuna means multiple people who are forgiving, who are turning to repentance. Okay. So una is kind of like the sound way of making something plural. And this applies to masculine words. So most of the time, you'll see masculine sound plural apply to words that are describing men, or at least describing human beings more generally. So we saw Muslimun becoming Muslimuna, Mu'minun becoming Mu'minuna, so believers, and so on. So the same way you have a masculine sound plural, you also have a feminine sound plural. And so this applies to words that typically, they're feminine words, and they typically have the ta marbuta ending. Okay, so we have mu'minatun, so a believing woman, becomes mu'minatun, believing women. Okay, so a group of believing women, we'll call that mu'minatun. Okay, so you'll see what's happened is that the atun ending here has changed to atun. Atun. Okay, so we had una for the masculine sound plural, we have atun for the feminine sound plural. And this applies to other words as well that end in tun. So for example, ayatun becomes ayatun. A verse, a group of verses or multiple verses. Ayatun. Now, not every word that ends in atun becomes atun. So you have to kind of learn these words have masculine sound plural, these words have feminine sound plural, and then these words have broken plurals. So when you hear broken plural, you should think irregular words or irregular plurals. So just like in English, goose become geese. The same way, there's no pattern there. You just kind of have to know that. The same way in Arabic, most words actually fall into broken plural. So there's no pattern. You just kind of have to learn it. So the word abdun, which means a slave, becomes ibadun, which means multiple slaves. Qarnun, a generation, becomes qurunun, generations. Okay, and again, most words in Arabic actually fall into the broken plural category, and there isn't any sort of pattern here. You see, like, why did abd become ibad? There's this insertion of this alif randomly in the middle. You just kind of have to pick it up as you go along. Okay. You might think that qarnun qurunun sounds like a masculine plural because it has the un, but you'll notice that the una it didn't get added to the ending of qarnun. It's not that like it became qarnuna, which would be the masculine sound plural. This is different. There's a waw that's ended in the middle. qurunun. Okay, and there's many such types of patterns. Kitabun becomes kutubun, rasul becomes rusulun, and you just kind of start to recognize these patterns as you learn more Arabic. And then there's a set of nouns that are just plural by meaning. So there's no singular version or plural version. There's just one word, and that word takes on plural grammatical rules. And so the most common example of such a word in the Quran is the word qawmun, which means a people or a nation. Okay, so it's technically a singular word, but it's because of its meaning, which refers to whole people, a whole group of people. It's going to take on plural adjectives, for example. Okay, and so speaking of adjectives, so the whole reason we bring up plurals is because when you have an adjective that describes a noun, they have to agree in terms of their plurality. So for example, if we have the phrase rajulun mu'minun, that means a believing man. And so you'll see the word here rajulun is singular, man, and same way mu'minun is singular, believing. Okay, so rajulun mu'minun, a believing man. What about the second phrase here? Al-qawmul kafiruna, a disbelieving nation, a disbelieving people. And you'll notice al-qawm, as we said, is, this is definite. So this is the disbelieving people, or the disbelieving nation. And you'll notice, like we said, qawm is plural, and so similarly, the adjective associated with it, al-kafiruna, disbelieving, you have to make it plural as well. And we do that because of based on the sound masculine plural here. Okay, so the trickiest part of this whole lesson, and if there's one thing that might trip you up in Arabic plurals, it's that broken plurals are grammatically very unintuitive. So grammatically, broken plurals, okay, so this is only that third category that we described, are treated like singular feminine. Okay, so it's probably easiest to look at a few examples here. So let's say we have the word here, kutubun. So kutubun is the plural of kitabun. So it means books. Qayyimatun is a singular feminine adjective. How do we know that? Well, you'll notice the tun ending at the end. So that's how you know it's feminine. And it's not qayyimatun, it's not plural, it's singular. And so as a result, this is actually a singular feminine adjective that's being used to describe what is actually a plural masculine noun. But because it's a broken plural, we treat it like a singular feminine. So kutubun qayyimatun, valuable books or valuable documents. Manafi' means benefits. It's a plural, and it's a broken plural. Okay, you'll notice that there's no sign of any una or atun, and so we know it must be a broken plural. And as a result, we use the singular feminine adjective kathiratun. Okay, so what would the masculine adjective have been? It would have been kathirun, but now we use kathiratun, which means many. And so in this case, we have manafi'u kathiratun, which means many benefits. We'll end with this example here. Al-qurunul ula. So this is al-qurun here. We saw this word before. Qarnun means generation. Qurun means generations. And the al means the generations. And so as a result, the adjective, remember, it has to agree on the definiteness, so it also has to be al. And ula is the feminine form of awwal, which means first. And so we have here, again, a feminine singular adjective being used to describe this word here. So al-qurunul ula, the first generations. Alright, so to recap, nouns and adjectives have to agree on 4 things: definiteness or indefiniteness, gender, and now we've covered the third one, singular or plural. And in the next lesson, we'll take a look at case endings as well. Okay, so that's it for today's lesson. Let's do a few exercises. So the first one here is manafi'u kathiratun. What does this mean here? So we saw this example before. Manafi'u is benefits. Kathiratun is many, many benefits. And this is an indefinite phrase. Next one here. Fawakihu kathiratun. Fawakih is the plural fruits. So what does this phrase mean here? Many fruits. Al-Qurunul Ula, we saw this before. Generations. First, the first generations. Al-Qawmul Zalimun, the people, the oppressing, the oppressive people, or the wrongdoing people. Al-Qawmul Kafiruna, similar phrase, the people, the disbelieving people. Always make sure to watch out for the al. Is it the disbelieving people or is it a disbelieving people? In this case, it's the disbelieving people. Rijalun mu'minuna. So rijal is actually the plural of rajulun, and it means men. And so rijal is actually a very interesting word in Arabic. It's a broken plural, but because it's referring to men, you still use the sound adjective. So this is a bit of an exception. There's a few exceptions here and there, that there's not too many of them. You'll just pick up as you go along. So typically, for this, you use the sound masculine adjective. So here we have the believing men. A believing men. A believing group of people. Because it's definite. Finally, Allahu Tawwabun. God is the one who is continuously forgiving. Okay, so you'll notice here this is a definite noun followed by an indefinite adjective. And so now going back to the previous lesson, when we see a definite noun followed by an indefinite adjective, now that's a complete sentence. So now we have God is the oft forgiving. And I'll mention again here that even though the definite word is followed by indefinite word, they still have to agree. The two words still have to agree on all of the other aspects. So the word Allah is masculine. Of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not have any gender, but linguistically the word is masculine. And Tawwab is also masculine. Allah, the word is singular, and Tawwabun is also singular. Alright, and that's the end of lesson 2. Jazakallahu khair, and we'll see you at the start of lesson 3. Assalamu alaikum.